There's a quiet hallway in an airport I still think about sometimes. I was walking toward my gate after a long week on the road, and the place was full of that late evening hush. Luggage wheels, distant echoes, the faint smell of coffee left too long on a warmer. And as I passed this small prayer room tucked between two terminals, I noticed a man slip inside. Nothing unusual, except for the way he entered. Gentle, deliberate, like someone stepping into a memory instead of a room. For a moment, I stopped walking. Something in that simple act pressed on a part of my heart I didn't even know was waiting to feel anything at all. I don't know why that stayed with me. Maybe because so much of my life has felt like rushing, delayed flights, delayed dreams, delayed peace. And yet that man, a total stranger, seemed to carry something I've spent years trying to earn. Something that didn't look loud or dramatic, but quietly certain, a kind of belonging. That's when a strange question surfaced in me, almost uninvited. Why is it that the people who seem to stand under the heaviest spotlight so often go searching for the simplest, most grounding kind of truth? I'd heard interviews before, people like Steve Harvey talking about how Islam kept crossing his path through the kindness of Muslims he met, through the discipline they lived with, through the peace he saw in their families. And I kept noticing a pattern. Actors, athletes, comedians, singers, all saying the same thing in different ways. They had fame, money, admiration, yet something in their lives still ached for firmness, for direction, for a cleaner way to carry the soul. That question wouldn't leave me alone, and the more I sat with it, the more it led me toward teachings I had never really taken time to understand. The first thing that struck me wasn't a rule, it wasn't a ritual, it wasn't even a belief. It was the way Islam speaks about the heart. This world tells you the heart is a fragile thing. Protect it, indulge it, feed it every craving, hide it when it's hurting, repair it with distractions. But Islam teaches that the heart is not something you pamper. It's something you train. Like a wild horse that can become noble with guidance. Like a lamp that only shines when trimmed, not when drowned in fuel. That idea shook me because I grew up believing fulfillment came from addition. Add achievements, add rewards, add attention, add comfort. But here was a faith built on subtraction. Subtract the ego, subtract the noise, subtract the excess that steals your clarity. And suddenly, those celebrities I used to assume were chasing Islam for mystique or novelty. I began to see them differently. They weren't reaching for something exotic. They were reaching for something honest. I remember studying the meaning of Islam and feeling my chest tighten. Submission, surrender, words I once thought were signs of weakness. But in this context, they sounded like the deepest kind of freedom. A freedom from performing, from impressing, from pretending you are enough to carry your entire life on your own shoulders. The more I read, the more I felt something rearranging inside me. There's a verse that says, God is closer than your jugular vein, closer than your pulse, closer than the breath you don't pay attention to. And I sat there thinking, how many years have I been trying to find closeness by traveling outward instead of inward? There's a tenderness in Islamic wisdom I didn't expect. It teaches you how to speak to your own fear, how to soften your anger, how to stand up straight when sadness tries to fold you in half. It doesn't flatter you. It doesn't coddle you. It guides you, sometimes with a firm hand, like someone who refuses to watch you ruin yourself. At night, I would read about prayer, not the motions, but the intention. The idea that 5 times a day you step out of the world's chase and step back into who you actually are. I imagined what it would feel like to pause life that intentionally, to touch your forehead to the ground, not because you're defeated, but because you finally trust something greater than your own plans. Something in me softened and something else tightened, like the beginning of a spine straightening. I realized how often I had been living on autopilot, floating between obligations, relationships, deadlines, collecting stress like it was currency, and small Islamic teachings kept showing up like signposts in places I didn't expect. Speak good or remain silent. Do not lose hope in the mercy of God. Even a smile is charity. God does not burden a soul more than it can bear. These weren't lines I read. They were lines that read me. They exposed the parts of my life that had become too complicated, too tangled. And they reminded me that simplicity isn't the absence of richness, it's the presence of purpose. I started noticing how celebrity after celebrity described the same moment. Not fireworks, not angels descending, just stillness, a clarity that rose inside them like dawn, a realization that the world's applause had never actually reached their hearts. But this faith somehow did. And what fascinated me most was this. Islam didn't ask them to become someone else. It asked them to become sincere, to become aligned, to return to a rhythm humans were created to live by. Wake with intention, eat with gratitude, speak with dignity, earn with honesty, pray with awareness, love with responsibility. These are simple things, but simple things become sacred when the world forgets them. I remember watching a short clip once where someone said that Islam didn't change him, it revealed him. That stayed with me, because maybe all of us are walking around with a version of ourselves we've never been properly introduced to. And maybe faith, any faith, but especially one built on discipline and mercy, acts like a mirror that finally tells the truth. In quiet moments now, I think about the man I saw in that airport. The way he walked into the prayer room like someone returning home. I didn't know his story, but I envied his certainty. It made me reflect on how modern life piles expectations on us like sandbags. We're told to always be on, always visible, always performing. Celebrities feel that pressure at a magnitude most of us can't imagine. So when they discover a faith that teaches privacy, humility, intention, and grounded confidence, it makes sense that something deep inside them exhales. One day, after a particularly heavy week, I sat in my car in a parking lot and just breathed for a moment. And I whispered, almost without thinking, "Guide me to what brings peace." It wasn't a prayer I planned. It wasn't poetic. It was a confession of exhaustion. And it felt like something in the universe paused to listen. Maybe that's why people like Steve Harvey keep pointing to Islam, not as a trend, but as a reminder that peace doesn't come from being praised, it comes from being anchored, from knowing who you are when the lights turn off, from knowing who holds you when your own strength burns out. There's a line I once heard from a Muslim friend. He said, "Islam doesn't make life easy, it makes life clear." I didn't understand it at the time, but now it feels like the difference between wandering in fog and walking toward a horizon you can finally see. Sometimes I imagine the heart as a room with dusty windows, and each sincere teaching you learn wipes one pane clean. Light enters slowly, then suddenly, and you begin to realize the room was never empty, just dim. Modern life is loud, fame is louder, but truth whispers. And Islam is a faith built on listening to that whisper before the world's noise drowns it out. If there's anything all these celebrity stories have taught me, it's that humans, no matter how admired they are still fragile beings looking for steadiness. We all want a voice that says, "You're cared for." We all want a path that keeps us from drifting. We all want a peace that doesn't depend on public approval. And when people find that peace in Islam, their faces change. Their posture changes, their choices change, not because they're chasing a new identity, but because they finally encountered a truth that doesn't shift with trends or seasons or fame. As for me, I'm still learning, still listening, still unraveling old knots in my chest, but something in this journey has softened my skepticism and strengthened my spirit. And I carry these teachings with a kind of respect I didn't know how to feel before. I don't know where this path will take me. But I know this, every time I learn a new piece of Islamic wisdom, it feels like a small window opening. The air gets clearer, the room gets brighter, and my heart feels a little less alone. So tonight, as I speak these words, I'm grateful. Grateful for the questions that once unsettled me. Grateful for the truths that steadied me. Grateful for a faith that keeps inviting me to become more honest with myself. Maybe that's why so many people, famous or not, find themselves drawn to Islam. Not because it offers escape, but because it offers alignment. A way to breathe with purpose. A way to walk with dignity. A way to live with a heart that knows where it belongs. And as the world keeps spinning faster, I hold on to one quiet certainty. Peace isn't something you chase, it's something you return to. Some people return through hardship, some through searching, some through a single moment in an airport hallway. For me, it was the realization that truth doesn't need to be loud to change you. And as this reflection closes, I'm left with a simple, steady feeling, like a soft light rising behind the ribs, a feeling that says you're closer to peace than you think. And maybe that's enough for now.